Hello and welcome back everyone to my channel. Today I'll be guiding you through 10 important updates or 10 important points to consider while making an MS project plan. So I had a short video uploaded some time back which showed those 10 points. Today I will be showing you each of these points how you go about it in Microsoft Project. So I have a project over here that has a few tasks, summary task and subtask defined in it. And we'll start off with our first important tip, that is to define a project start date. So to define a project start date, you head over to the project tab that's already open on my screen. Then you select the project information, and over here you can select your project start date. Let's say I select 1st April, a slightly dicey date, but let's go with it. And I select project start date as the schedule starting point, and I click OK. So you can see immediately the tasks that were auto scheduled were set to 1st April. Now that takes us to our second tip. Second tip is to change the default task settings to auto scheduled. In newer versions of Microsoft Project, you can find it right over here in the below tab of your below bar of your MS Project. Once you click on this option, it has two features available: manually scheduled and auto scheduled. So when I select auto scheduled, so any task that I create will be marked as auto scheduled. So let me just change these to auto scheduled so that every task is aligned. So that covers our second tip, which is to assign defined new tasks as setting to auto schedule. Now heading over to our third tip, which is to define your project calendar. Now this is the most important thing. You have to make sure you're following the correct calendar in your project. So you head over to change working time. By default, it's a standard project calendar. You can create your own. The standard one has Saturdays, Sundays marked off, and you should always define the upcoming public holidays in the plan as well, so that you make sure you're not skipping any day that should be marked as a holiday. For example, I mark 11th April, just for the sake of understanding, as a public holiday, and I can also define it to occur every month, every week, or yearly. So I can define it, to be repeating at every year. Let's say I define it for 3 years, and I click OK. Now your calendar is also set for the project. Now heading over to our fourth tip, we need to make sure we have a complete list of tasks available, like I've done already. So this is basically, I've made sure that I have each and every activity that I envision in the plan to be there listed, and it should be also intended accordingly. So heading over to our fifth tip, which is a an item that you shouldn't do, which is to do not assign task dates or durations at first. So as you can see, I have not defined any durations or dates yet. It has set those dates by itself due to auto scheduled setting. So that's an important thing, that you define these things once you have set the parameters of the entire project. So heading over to our sixth tip, which is to create a WBS using intent and outdent. Now what does this mean? This means that you should align your tasks in a manner that relay a project structure. For example, if I have defined this like this, So it wouldn't be clear whether these tasks are within summary task 1 or are they in sequence of it. So this is called WBS, or work breakdown structure, which you can also see by right clicking on any of the columns. Insert a column, write WBS, and you can see that you can see the structure of the project showing over here. So these are nodes, then we have subnodes, then we have subnodes of 1.4 and accordingly 1.5 and 1.6. So this is called work breakdown structure. So make sure your project plan is structured based on the dependencies, based on the tasks that fall under a certain category. And now tip number 7 is to define task relationships. Now, right now, each of my tasks are isolated from each other. So let's give them a relationship to follow. So since my first task is the one which starting off the project, so I make task number 2, task B, dependent on task A, which is lying on task ID 2. So you can see it immediately changes the date. Right now, I'm not defining the durations yet. I'm simply putting the relationships. And once I define the relationships, I will be keeping these sequential, and also I will take this one as in sequence of others and make task D parallel to task 2, and there we have it. So we have defined the relationships. Now we need to define durations. So I define it as 2 days, 1 day. You can see a question mark against each of these task durations. This is what MS Project does in default. It considers it an estimated number, so that what the question mark represents. And let me just finish it off. So I have defined the durations. I have defined the relationships. So tip number 7 is now complete. Now we move on to tip number 8, which is to take note of date constraints. So date constraints you can find in your task details. So if there's a condition where by default it's there as soon as possible, however, let's say my subtask 1.4.1 has a dependency that it cannot start before a certain date. So let me set a date which is slightly after its actual date. So you can see there's an indication right over here which shows that there's a constraint on this particular task. So you need to make sure, as part of tip 8, to take note of date constraints so that you don't get frustrated, or you don't get confused on the project dates not moving. So that's because the dates are defined, then it should be must start on, rather. So it will change the date accordingly. Moving on to tip number 9, the second last tip is avoid putting predecessors in summary tasks. So what this means is, this is our summary task which has a few tasks defined inside of it. So the tip says that we don't need to put anything over here in the predecessors for this particular task, because, for example, I mistakenly enter 4 over here. So this would mean that task number 4, this one, is a predecessor for all of these tasks. However, if I remove it, it only becomes a predecessor for this particular task. So other tasks are not dependent on task number 4. So this is important because this is how the dates drive. Once the duration of any of these predecessors changes, it directly affects its successor. And last but not the least, the tip number 10 is to save your project's baseline. So that's the important tip. So this is with the consideration that you've done and defined everything in your project. You've gone through all the resource loading and stuff like that. Then you head over to the project tab and set a baseline of your project. You can set multiple baselines all up to baseline 10. So in total you can save 11 baselines. So I save this baseline for the entire project and say OK. So just to make sure the baseline dates are applied, I can also see them over here by adding these columns over here. So it's available, and you can see the baselines defined in the dates there again. So those were the 10 important tips for Microsoft project. I hope this will be helpful whenever you're creating project. These are small tips that you need to take care whenever you're creating a new project plan, and it will always help you in creating good plans without any problems. Until our next video, please make sure you keep subscribed to the channel, and if you find this video helpful, please don't hesitate in clicking the like button. Until our next video, please take care and bye bye.